Hey folks, Matt from Avid here, and I'm going to give you a walkthrough of our brand new instrument, PlayCell. When you first open up PlayCell, this is the default instrument you see. It is purely a sine wave. Has a little bit of grit to it, but it's a sine wave. Also, there's a scale mode on the keyboard. On the bottom right, simply select your scale, let's say C minor, and the first mode is view only. This will not change any of the notes, nor will it mute any notes, but it will illuminate on the keyboard what notes are actually within the scale of C minor. If I play a C sharp, which is not in C minor, still plays. If we select the mode mute, mute is going to mute any note that is not within the scale of C minor. So for instance, if we play an F sharp, which would be a flat fifth, which would not be in the scale of C minor, absolutely nothing, but if we go up to G, there we go, or F. So that will stop you from playing any notes that are not within C minor if you so want to do so. And lastly, we have quantize. What quantize is going to do is actually take any note that is not within the scale, and it's going to actually move it to be a note that is within the scale. So check this out. I'm just going to hit a bunch of random notes and see what happens. And truthfully, I was playing a lot of notes that were not in C minor right there, and it works. With every PlayCell instrument, there are going to be 4 macro controls. In this case, we have 4 called grit, depth, echo, and space. Grit, add some grit. Depth, add some modulation. Echo. Adds an echo. And space, in this case, is a reverb. But PlayCell does a lot more than a sine wave. It actually includes 80 instruments and a lot more than 80 presets. So let's check out some of these instruments. We go to the palette series, and the palette series is essentially our factory bank. And some of the more traditional instruments, for instance, like we could take the felt piano, for instance. And it's just bread and butter piano sound, but it sounds nice and certainly would be great in a songwriting session. Let's try something else that's traditional. Let's take the legato strings. So if you just need a basic string sound, that's going to get you there. Easy to write with, sounds nice. And let's take one more of the traditional instruments. Let's do percussion. Let's do taikos, because taikos are fun. And taikos are huge. They're used very, very commonly in film scores. So here's a taiko. That'll do. Now, let's get to the synthetic-based instruments, which I personally designed myself, and I had a ton of fun making these because I used a lot of analog gear in this room, a lot of guitar pedals, a lot of sound design techniques to really make some evocative sounds that pretty much all you have to do is hit play, and ideally it's going to inspire you. And they did inspire me. I've written a lot with this stuff. So let's start with Synth Bass. And let's start with, let's just start with mini bass, because that's a pretty simple one. And as you can see, with the synthesizer-based instruments, there are also 5 presets per instrument. So let's just start with mini bass. So, not too hard to figure out what kind of synth that came from, but this is really like a classic mini bass, if you will. So, lots of fun there. Let's take a look at a different bass. Let's try Neuro. So that's a very drum and bass inspired kind of sound. But let's try one of the other presets in Neuro just to see something a little bit different. So if we go to Synth Bass, Neuro, let's try Neuro Stab. So it sounds drastically different than Neuro itself, and you can make your own patches that modify the existing sounds pretty easily. So let's take a look now at some of the leads. Let's start with the Pulmo Perk organ. This one, especially the preset Love Me, if you're familiar with 90s house, you might recognize this kind of sound, although I did not make this using that M1 organ sound. This is actually made on an analog synth and sounds super cool. So I'm not going to play the exact melody, but this might sound familiar to you. So that'll get you there. It's a great sound and iconic. And let's take another lead. Let's go to Super Viral. Classic big pad. And of course the macros will just filthy it up even more. Like here's the grit all the way maxed out. Sounds cool. And for the sake of actually demoing some of the sound design capabilities of this, it's very basic, but it's very effective. Let's take happy thirds. And happy thirds, this might remind you of something you heard in electronic music in, say, around 2012. Very like electro-y kind of sound. And aside from our macros, we have an advanced mode, and you just click this button up here, and now you have access to an amplitude and a filter envelope. And so, of course, let's hold this note. Turn up the resonance. And the amplitude envelope, we'll do this. You get creative with that in many different kinds of ways. So for instance, let's take our, this is our staple sound right here. Let's turn it into a pad. And how can we do that? Well, let's drop our filter envelope or our filter cutoff down to say about there. Let's extend the attack time by just dragging this point, and let's extend the decay of the filter envelope, and let's drop the sustain. And now we're just going to drag this envelope amount slider over. And now we get sounds like this with the filter enabled. We probably want to add a little more envelope. So now if we add some space, and let's add some echo and some depth, now we got something that sounds like this. So really pretty. And if you want to go the other way, let's just cut our attack right there. Let's take off the space. Let's take off basically everything. Let's just have a little stabby sound. So we're going to make our decay nice and short. And, let's keep the envelope actually about there. And now, so super simple, and it sounds great. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the pads, because the pads are really special to me. And these came from a lot of different sources. So let's start with the ambient phone piano, and I love this one. In order to make ambient phone piano, I just walked over to my piano in the other room, and I took my phone and just recorded a few notes there. And then, thanks to a wonderful tool called granular synthesis, I was able to transform it into this very evocative pad. And just check this out. I'm just going to hold one note. Let's add another. So it's really lush and it evolves, and I love that. Let's check out one of the other pads. Let's do Heavenly Ghost. This one's very pretty too. And that sounds straight out of a score a composer like Cliff Martinez might write, for instance. I was definitely inspired by those kind of sounds when I made this. Also, keep an eye out on the Sonic Drop, where we will be releasing new PlayCell instruments in the future. So that's PlayCell, and like I said before, it's 80 instruments, a lot more than 80 presets, and it is all instruments and tools to hopefully inspire you and your music. So just go now to Avid link, download it for yourself, and have fun.